Hi, my name's Lynn, and this is my channel, The Tree of Life. Today I will be continuing on with my series on the book, The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. I had already started to do a video before this one, and as I was progressing through the video, I discovered that my Shih Tzu is in the other room. Snoring like a foghorn. So I had to stop, put him somewhere where he can't be heard, and continue on and redo this video. So here we go, round two. I just have to laugh about that dog. I mean, he snores night and day. Anyway, so continuing on, the chapter we're in today is problem solving in time, and as usual, I will read some out of the book, and then I will make commentaries and observations. Problem solving in time. Having touched upon some of the ways in which parental love or its lack may influence the development of self-discipline in general and the capacity to delay gratification in particular, let us examine some of the more subtle yet quite devastating ways in which difficulties in delaying gratification affect the lives of most adults. And Scotty here is going to share with us some of his personal experiences on this subject. At the age of 37, I learned how to fix things. Prior to that time, almost all my attempts to make minor plumbing repairs, mend toys, or assembled box furniture according to the accompanying hieroglyphical instruction sheet ended in confusion, failure, and frustration. Despite having managed to make it through medical school and support a family as a more or less successful executive and psychiatrist, I considered myself to be a mechanical idiot. Well, I don't have the problem of having a medical degree in psychiatry. I happen to be a tradesman, and that's what I do, is fix things. But he's going to make a point here. Then one day at the end of my 37th year, while taking a spring Sunday walk, I happened upon a neighbor in the process of repairing a lawnmower. After greeting him, I remarked, "Boy, I sure admire you. I've never been able to fix those kinds of things or do anything like that." And my neighbor, without a moment's hesitation, shot back, "That's because you don't take the time." I resumed my walk, somehow disquieted by the guru-like simplicity, spontaneity, and definitiveness of his response. "You don't suppose he could be right, do you?" I asked myself. Somehow it registered, and the next time the opportunity presented itself to make a minor repair, I was able to remind myself to take my time. And my thoughts on this is that, you have several types of people in the world. Some are jack of all trades, and they kind of have a smattering of knowledge around various subjects. And so their intelligence and their skill sets are spread across a wide variety of things. And then you have people that tend to spend a lot of time in studies, specializing in one particular thing. And I think that both methodologies have their pros and cons. I've definitely learned that when I will take the time to get somewhat proficient at something, it tends to save me a lot of money. Some of my rental properties that I've had, when I've hired out the work, it tends to end up being almost triple. So I've had to learn to be a jack of all trades. But I do try to spend enough time to get proficient at the thing that I'm trying to accomplish. So I'm going to continue on with this. Oh, geez, I lost. Oh, here it is. Who among us could say that they unfailingly devote sufficient time to analyzing their children's problems or tensions within the family? Who among us is so self-disciplined that he or she says I can't even pronounce this, resignedly in the face of family problems, it's beyond me? And please, in the comments, if you know a better way to say resignedly, please let me know. So moving on, that's my take on time and problem solving. Obviously, the more organized you are with your time, scheduling things out, tends to make you more efficient and you tend to get more things done. Day planners, day timers have been a science for decades now. I will say, though, that sometimes spontaneity is also a good thing, shoot from the hip. But taking the time to actually do a job right, as a tradesman, you discover rather quickly as an apprentice that if you do things half-baked, what ends up happening is you have to come back to that project and end up doing it all over again. So really there's no escaping, injecting some quality into the work that you do in life. So I'm going to move on this one. I think that it ties into the previous two chapters. And I'm not going to go into extreme detail and commentary on this one. So I am going to move on to the next subject, which is responsibility. And as I had mentioned in a previous chapter, I have broken that word apart into the two words it's made up out of. And that is response and ability. And so when life invariably will send you a problem or a conundrum, the ability to respond to it and not freeze like a deer in the headlights is obviously important. And so Scotty goes on to say, we cannot solve life's problems except by solving them. This statement may seem idiotically tautological or self-evident, yet it is seemingly beyond the comprehension of much of the human race. Man, read the paper or the electronic news now on the internet. Look around you. I don't want to sound superior here, but this is such an obvious thing, and too many people just don't seem to have that light bulb come on. And so that is more or less the purpose for me sharing this book. And I will be honest, there are times when I just want to moan and whine about things and the way the world is, and I don't get around to the actual business of dealing with problems. But he shares some very interesting case notes. What I love about this book is this gives a person a chance to be a fly on the wall of a psychiatrist's office and see the inner workings of what a psychiatrist does. And looking at what causes people's motivations and why they do what they do and why they get into such misery and suffering. And how valuable is that? I love this book from the first days that I was reading it. Let me move on here. Case study. A career sergeant in the Army stationed in Okinawa and in serious trouble because of his excessive drinking was referred for psychiatric evaluation and, if possible, assistance. Brief side note. M. Scott Peck was a psychiatrist for the U.S. Army, just so you know. And he was stationed on Okinawa. So this man was referred for his excessive drinking. He denied that he was an alcoholic or even that his use of alcohol was a personal problem, saying, "There's nothing else to do in the evenings in Okinawa except to drink." Another side note, in my wilder days of my youth, I used to party and drink, and I met a cross section of people, and boy, did this particular chapter ring true in my life. And I've lived these personal experiences and the disease of alcoholism. I've watched it in people's lives. So Scotty goes on to say, "Do you like to read?" I asked him. "Oh, yes, I like to read, sure." "Then why don't you read in the evening instead of drinking?" "It's too noisy to read in the barracks." "Well, then why don't you go to the library?" "The library's too far away." "Is the library farther away than the bar that you go to?" "Well, I'm not much of a reader. That's not where my interests lie." "Well, then, do you like to fish?" "Sure, I love to fish." "Why not go fishing instead of drinking?" "Because I have to work all day long." "Can't you go fishing at night?" "No, there isn't any night fishing in Okinawa." "But there is," I said. "I know several organizations that fish at night here. Would you like me to put you in touch with them?" "Well, I really don't like to fish." Um, Let me tell you how many times have I watched a friend going down the dark hole of drinking and alcoholism. And you care about your friends and the people that you encounter in your life, and you genuinely see that they have a problem. And it is so sad and tragic when they can't see that they have a problem. And you'll try to get them to come up with something else besides drinking as a solution to life. And it truly is a disease of the mind because it's self-lying to yourself. You're just lying to yourself. There is something about addiction that will just grab you, and it will start running a tape recording in your brain, and you don't have any control over it anymore. And I've got to share a quick personal story. I have a friend from long ago, a drinking buddy and a companion that I used to enjoy spending time with. And, in our party days, we'd go out on adventures. But I even gave him a job, and, he just could not show up to work with a hangover and, incapacitated to do his work and more importantly, do it safely. So we had to part ways, and that was painful for both of us. But he, years later, I guess, forgave me enough to call me up and ask me for a letter of reference. And I am certainly not criticizing him or condemning him. This is just illustrative of my personal experience and what Scott Peck is trying to point out here. And he wanted a letter of reference to go get a job, and I was happy to help him because I still cared for my friend from my youthful days. And but I'm a sneaky guy, I went down to my local Al-Anon club and I got myself a 12-step big book from Alcoholics Anonymous. And along with the letter, I gave him that book. And it wasn't done to be a fundamentalist, preachy kind of guy. It was because he had just gone through a very painful divorce. And he had straightened out his life and had the love of a woman in his life. And the marriage fell apart because the drinking got a hold of his leg and started consuming his life again. And that's heartbreaking to see that when you care about your friend. So I brought that over to him, and he wanted nothing to do with that book. And so that book still sits on my shelf somewhere. But to finish off this story of our friendship, about 5 years later, I was walking into a supply house, And strangely enough, you had to go through a dark hallway to get to the back will call counter. And I had ordered some parts that I had to go pick up for my work, my career. And strangely enough, I'm walking down this dark hallway, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw this bulletin board hanging on the wall. And nobody would look at the darn thing. It's in a shabby, dark hallway, but for some strange reason, this time around, after maybe tens of visits there, I decided to stop and pause and look over there on that bulletin board. And by golly, there was a piece of paper with a guy's picture on it. Excuse me. And I looked closely, and he was all nice and groomed, but I still recognized my old drinking buddy, who shall remain nameless. And I pulled the pin off of that piece of paper, and I looked at it, and it unfolded, and I looked inside of it, and basically what it was is a notice of his funeral and the hymns that they were going to play and the people that were going to attend his funeral. And I had just missed it by several days. And so, this is a story of synchronicity too. I've always asked myself, how is it possible that I was in the right time and the right place and paused to stop to look at that piece of paper on the wall? And had I been better prepared, I would have taken that out of my desk drawer that I have to this day and show it to you right now. But I won't, because of respecting boundaries and anonymity. And I haven't named his name either. That's not important. But I just felt like the universe kind of winked at me and said, well, this is what happened to your friend. And I was glad to know that. And, I'd lost track of his sister, who had also been a friend of mine. And I called her up and found out what the deal was. And he had gone drinking with some folks and started vomiting on their front room floor, and they just did not like that. So they put him in the car, took him down to the nearest park bench, and parked him on the park bench, face up, like this. And he aspirated on his own vomit and passed away sometime in the cold, dark night. I also took that paper over to the will call counter, and it turns out the letter of recommendation I had got him this job at this particular supply house. And he'd been a driver for a few years there. So maybe about 5 years, It's been a long, long time ago. So I wanted to share that. That ties in with this story of the soldier there on Okinawa. And I try to help my friends, but not judge and condemn them. So what Scotty goes on to say, what I hear you saying is that there are other things to do in Okinawa except to drink, but the thing you like to do most in Okinawa is drink. Well, isn't that obvious? Now, there's another story, comparative story, and it is a young wife, also in Okinawa, cut her wrists lightly with a razor blade and was brought to the emergency room where I saw her. I asked her, why had she done this to herself? To kill myself, of course. Why do you want to kill yourself? Because I can't stand it on this dumb island. You have to send me back to the States. I'm going to kill myself if I have to stay here any longer. What is it about living on Okinawa that's so painful for you? I asked. She began to cry in a whining sort of way. I don't have any friends here, and I'm all alone all the time. That's too bad. How come you haven't been able to make any friends? Because I have to live in a stupid Okinawan housing area and none of my neighbors speak English. Why don't you drive over to the American housing area or to the wives' club during the day so that you can make some friends? Because my husband has to drive the car to work. Can't you drive him to work because you're alone and bored all day, I asked? No, it's a stick shift car, and I don't know how to drive a stick shift car, only an automatic. Why don't you learn how to drive a stick shift car? She glared at me. On these roads, you must be crazy. And coming from somebody that's just slashed their wrists, right? This still makes me laugh after all these years, and I've read, not to, I don't want to look down on somebody having troubles, but this is just a wonderful illustration of human beings and their problems, isn't it? Okay, because I'm going to go on from here to neuroses and character disorders. Most people who come to see a psychiatrist are suffering from what is called either a neurosis or a character disorder. Put most simply, these two conditions are disorders of responsibility, and as such, they are opposite styles of relating to the world and its problems. The neurotic assumes too much responsibility, the person with a character disorder not enough. When neurotics are in conflict with the world, they automatically assume that they are at fault. When those with character disorders are in conflict with the world, they automatically assume that the world is at fault. The two individuals just described had character disorders. The sergeant felt that his drinking was Okinawa's fault, not his, and the wife also saw herself as playing no role whatsoever in her own isolation. A neurotic woman, on the other hand, also suffering from loneliness and isolation on Okinawa, complained, I drive over to the non-commissioned officers' wives' club every day to look for friendship, but I don't feel at ease there. I think that the other wives don't like me. And by the way, my little Shih Tzu in the other room has just woken up and discovered that he's locked in the bedroom. And I guess my wife's going to do me a solid and go deal with that so we don't have to hear the foghorn. This woman assumed total responsibility for her loneliness, feeling she was entirely to blame. What she found out in the course of therapy was that she was unusually intelligent and an ambitious person, and that she was ill at ease with the other sergeants' wives as well as with her husband because she was considerably more intelligent and ambitious than they. She became able to see that her loneliness, while her problem, was not necessarily due to the fault or defect of her own. Ultimately, she was divorced, put herself through college while raising her children, became a magazine editor, and married a successful publisher. Scott Peck comes from the New England upper crust of society, and maybe I detect a little strain of snottiness here about, being a success, financial success or a social success. And, I think these things are important. But the value in this story is that, this woman was out of place and had surrounded herself with people that were just feeding off of her. And she was destined with her God-given talents to go on to do bigger and better things. And so coming to that self-realization, she was able to move on and live a productive and fulfilling life. Okay, so Scotty goes on to say, in such ways, these parents in effect say to their children, you are responsible for the quality of my marriage, my mental health, and my lack of success in life. Since they lack the capacity to see how appropriate this is, the children will often accept this responsibility, and insofar as they do accept it, they will become neurotic. It is in such ways that character disordered parents almost invariably produce character disordered or neurotic children. It is the parents themselves who visit their sins upon the children. It is not simply in their role as parents that character disordered individuals are ineffective and destructive. These same character traits usually extend into their marriages, their friendships, and their business dealings, to any area of their existence in which they fail to assume responsibility for its quality. So you find out that some of these mental health issues, a lot of it does have to do with responsibility. The conundrum here is that you're stuck in a complex or a loop that's running, let's say an addiction or a point of view from your parents, that you need to step outside of that box and see things from a different perspective, or it literally will hold you back and poison everything that comes in your life. I'm just about done and ready to wrap this up, but what pops into my mind is that you can see that some parents spoil their children to death, and so they're self-entitled and they go out into the world expecting everybody to orbit them like the sun. And, it's just grievous to be around those kind of people, overinflated. But it's also sad for them too, because, their lives are misery and suffering. And at the heart of the matter, lonely and self-destructive. And then you look at other children that their parents had put all their problems on the children and projected their toxicity onto their children, and they go out and they get involved with people that use them and abuse them. And so, this book has been just a revelation for me. It's helped me to take a hard look at myself. And, it's hard, when you're driving a car down the road, you're constantly taking that steering wheel and moving it back and forth so that you keep between the lines. And that's never going to end, as we're traveling down this road of life. And hopefully this road less traveled, one that the crowd isn't swamping like and lately it looks like a freeway jam, right? Anyway, I'm getting old and I'm losing my train of thought here, but hopefully this particular chapter has also been useful, and I will move on to the next one next time around. All of you, blessings to you, and please stay safe and healthy out there. Thank you. Bye-bye.